everyone, welcome to Talulah's podcast. I am here with Professor Vishnu Nair, who's coming to us and here collaborating with us with the Mother Tree and Ganesh from Kerala, which is so exciting. The Mother Tree is actually here on the east coast of Australia, and Ganesh is primordial, he's everywhere, as we all are, but in a different way. And so we're excited. And just before we started going live with this podcast, I was just sharing with Vishnu a little bit more about the last podcast regarding how the Mother Tree was coming, and it was 3 times I think my eyes welled up with the emotion, because it was so gentle in the way it was creating the vocabulary to share with humanity just how valuable human beings are in the ecology of things, and to understand a little bit more about how nature produces itself, creates itself, which is really something we used to be aware of, and we do create that way as well, but we've forgotten a lot of our creativity of how we actually created our physiological state of being, which I thought that the way the tree spoke about that. So when Vishnu was interested in coming and doing this podcast with us, and being such an amazing communicator and storyteller as well, the Mother Tree was just very excited. And interestingly enough, I went to this same place and I just saw the most beautiful Caledonian native orchids, and they're just so pretty. And I thought that was just beautiful, because they're very, very elegant orchid and not a long flowering period. So I was so grateful to be able to see that. And I saw one, and then I thought, gosh, I hope I see more. And not too far down the trail, I saw a little cluster, which was super exciting. And I felt like that was just a prelude to what we're going to be talking about now, because nature is some people feel it's brutal. I feel it's just a symbiosis of elegance and beauty, and but also there's a fiery element within nature, and it's got all the dance of the elements, but there's a juvenile element, because that's where the seeds come from, that juvenility type of flow. So I was saying to Vishnu, I never know when I'm collaborating like this, what the Mother Tree or anyone's going to say, but let's begin. So actually, Vishnu, hi, welcome.
Thanks, Isis. I will just start with a question, because that's what I think I'm really, I have lots of questions. So I did listen to the podcast that you had with the Mother Tree, which I think was a little over 30 minutes. So it was really a nice podcast to compress. But I don't think I fully appreciate the profoundness of it at this point, because I think I may need a little bit more quieter space. But when I listened to it, I felt how profound you felt, particularly the message that the Mother Tree provided you. And now I exist in Kerala, which is like, full of herbs and trees and, all of that, the spices. And you exist right now in Australia, which is home to a lot of wild ancient plants and trees. So different geographies, but same interconnectedness. And I think my first question is related to that kind of interconnectedness, because oftentimes when we think about this interconnectedness, we always think about it from a human-centric point of view. And there is a whole new kind of like understanding evolving in the post-human field. There is relationality that exists between other kingdoms, animal, plant, whatever. So I wondered, even within that network of plants, by removing the human, would you be able to talk about the communication and the world that exists within the plant kingdom,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
communication, and how important that is for maintaining the diversity, but also sustainability? I mean, those are like buzzwords, but I'm just talking about that relationality within the plant kingdom.
Yeah, that's actually there's a lot to unpack in that question,
Yeah.
which is really exciting, because so we'll start with communication, because we around the world, I think the Mother Tree shared before, was that there are so many languages, but ultimately we can understand each other when we're coming from our being, because our being understands beyond the word. No matter what word within a language you're using, it understands the language of light. And even a plant that grows in the shade requires elements of light. It just does. And of course, the soil doesn't need light in the same way as what you see above ground, but it actually does still require light of a different nature. So it starts to begin and self-seed the understanding that this is really a reflection of also, and vice versa, we're a reflection of each other, of the multitude that we require energetically to just be present in a form that's physical, And so that's the first thing. And then you've got electrical pulses, which is electrical frequencies. So the microbes in the soil oscillate within the hyphae, which forms the mycelium, that sends out electrical signals, pulsations. And as we were sharing before we started the live podcast, is that in horticultural fields and that are connected to bush regeneration, they're starting to explore ways to grow plants differently, and they're using biostimulators. And one of the things, I was saying earlier was that, on one level you think, oh, well, that's really exciting, but they're only looking at that now because, at the rapid rate we're destroying our natural world. And it's by no means a depreciation of what human beings are doing, because it's just understanding our we're a cog in a very big wheel of all that is. And in a physical way, we've just got to understand a little bit more about who we are and our connection to our natural world, because we are the natural world as well. And so one of the things that may be exciting about what they're doing with it, because it's cutting out a lot of the fertilizers. We tend to use way too many fertilizers that are high in salts, and so that creates a salinity. But not only that, it goes into our waterways and creates this different thing. So nature doesn't need an external fertilizer. In Australia, people have often said over many years that Australia has poor soils. And, Ganesh has always come through and said, well, in what way? In what way are they poor? There's no such thing as poor in a universal sense. There's a misunderstanding, because it's a nutrient-based understanding when someone says poor soils, low in nutrients, and so the plants have adapted. But the plants have actually been a co-creator in that symbiotic relationship. So it's understanding the definition of poor in the context of that, which, at some point we'll go deeper into that, but it'll also raise up a few people's defences because it's just been known for so long. And Australia's not the only area, but one of the things we do as a result of that mindset is we tend to fertilise, and you taught to fertilise spring and change of season, spring and autumn, to give that nutrient boost. But if you look at how nature creates its own nutrient base, you've got a beautiful mycorrhizal full of microbes in the soil, and then you've got all the leaf litter that's forming. You've got the fungi, which is breaking down the tree trunks and things like that. So all of that is part of the biodiversity, but it's nutrient rich. So definitely within Australia, there's parts that don't have the nutrients, but then the plants have creating of themselves to seed themselves and grow in those soils as a collaboration, just like we're having a collaboration with the Mother Tree here in this podcast. But then even that isn't quite accurate. So I'm going to allow because trying to use words to describe something that's beyond word in so many ways. So I'll let the Mother Tree come through. It's very quiet, very calm sort of tone. So when we root ourselves into the soil, you have what you term the mycorrhizal. We will just say we have insects, we have worms, and we have many, many species of ground animals that pass through what they eat through their digestive system, that has a way of coagulating the nutrients into such a way through the gastric juices inside their digestive system. When they pass it through their gut, they release and pass it into and back to the soil in a different way. So as so many of you are aware that some seeds are germinated through birds eating them, passing through the seed, and it's gone through their system, and then as they fly, they poop and they pass that in, and then that allows some of the seeds in some of your seeds, like aeromophila, but not only. There's some plants you haven't yet discovered that is how we grow ourselves through that way. But there is so much more to that, because it is to really dive deep inside yourselves and understand your own symbiotic resonance within your own physical form, both as individuals, as a community, and as a collection. So our ecosystems are a collaborative energy beyond one singular ecosystem. All ecosystems have a harmony. You will find a heath ecosystem morphing into a coastal ecosystem, and then a sclerophyll. So there's no one determinate line, but the shrubs will change, our ground covers will change, our soil will change. It's a morphing from one, like an undulation. It's a morphing from one ecosystem to another, but we ourselves do not see us as different in the way that we have found the relationship that you see yourselves as different as human beings. You have different cultures. In when Isis has spoke to us about tissue culture, because in horticulture, she shared with us that they're using the tissue culture to create, and so that is a culture in your understanding. Our culture is one of you would think it's robotic, because from a limited understanding of how nature is truly conscious, it needs not a brain like a human being has, but it doesn't need the thought processes to create. It's that pure presence that doesn't require a thinking process. There is a heightened sensitivity of energy and a connection to all the frequencies that are constantly being created and let go of as we navigate and grow and expand. This is a timeless process, and there was an era in humanity that knew this. Deep down, you know this. And so, we see all human beings as an indigenous, because you are of what we are. And so that is of the land, of the sea, of the water, of the dance of the elements. And so their energy has no separation. So wherever you are, you're connected, And so when you are embracing your earthing power, and you are grounding through, some of you put your feet into our soil, or you walk the earth with your feet touching, without the separation of a soul, which is a shoe. You have a shoe and it has a soul, and then you are connecting energetically. So when you do that, and you allow your air element to become your ether, which is space, you get a deepening through your heart center of where I am is in relationship to our ecosystems. And when you feel that inside your human form, you feel the non-separation instantly. So therefore you also feel, I am the mother tree in you, yes.
Well, this body is very emotional, you know it. So,
So I'm back. Yeah.
yeah,
Do you get it right? It's so you can't help but your eyes water. I know. I so get it. I couldn't explain it, I think, in the last podcast, but the love. It's I sometimes, with human beings, it's tricky, because we often say I love you, but sometimes it's please don't take offense to anyone, but sometimes you can't feel the depth of that love. It's the words are coming out of the mouth, but I'm just not feeling it. I'm not feeling it. But when nature does choose to communicate and use the language of word, but it's always beyond word, which is where we connect, and that's why our eyes start to water. And nature has moisture in it, right? Even the most arid lands has an element of moisture in it, and you actually feel that really that pure presence of love, like in the truest understanding of what love is. And you understand relationships differently, because it is such a sattvic relationship. It's pure presence, and there's no demand from you. There's no, I'm giving you something, but I want something back. It's just, I'm showing up, I'm being present with you, and I'm sharing. No strings attached,
Can
And
we just do a podcast on that? Because that is
yeah,
because
yeah,
a lot of these, I mean, even not in terms of the ecology, but a lot of these modern relationship advice, for all these podcasts and gurus and all of them, it's very transactional all the time. Like, so yeah, I
yeah,
would talk to you, not to divert, I would like to talk to you offline about it maybe later. But
yeah.
one thing that really struck me in what you were explaining, there are two things, because, like you said, when you experience the embodiment of something, how do you then express that in a language? I mean, there's no human language that as I see can really truly understand it, right? It's just purely a presence. But still, as someone who really is
Yeah,
interested
you love your
in
words.
their language, because I was thinking about, like, why don't I write something about the non-human language, like, the poetry around it, like the dance, because as you're talking about the absorption and the symbiosis, because to me, not to labelize it, just felt like language. It is the language
It
of
is a language, yeah,
creation.
and that's why it's not to get stuck and not be the non-glue of something, because
Yeah.
we do get stuck and hung up on a word because of how we've experienced a word. And so it is, symbiosis is a language. Communicating through energy is a language without using words. Using words is a gift. It's a gift in itself. And the language of the trees recognize that it's a gift to be able to use this language so people can feel the presence of it. But what you're feeling when the eyes start to water, that's your being in communion, true communion with the energy of the tree, and not just that tree. It's actually the energy of that whole ecosystem that it's embodying. And it was a lovely gift for me. Going back into this place where this tree is, it's just such a beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, it's just a beautiful space. You can feel it, and at the moment, it's so many flowers are happening, but that's not what it wants me to share, because I'll just get carried away. But yeah, it is the energy. You can feel that presence. And interestingly enough, someone did this survey where it said, if you're feeling stressed and feeling a bit down, would you want to spend more time with friends and family, go into nature? And I think it gave three other things to choose from. And the 40% of the people chose to go to nature, So that in itself says we're craving that connection for something more than what we perceive in some way. There's something in there when you go into nature that it's not making a demand on you. Because in the way we've set up our economy of life as a human element, there's a lot of demands on us, fiscally, showing up, being present for people, listening, observing, but then, there's a demand on us pretty much 24 hours a day. There's a constant push of selling something. There's demands to get things done. There's a demand to be more than what we need to be right in this moment. It's exhausting. But nature, when you go into nature, you don't feel that as much. It may take some of us a little bit more time to just download, because the stress levels can be so high that sometimes we forget to breathe even when we're in nature, and then it's like, the big breath comes through and think, oh, that feels better. And then sometimes people are hiking and they're not in that mode either. They're just focusing on the hike. That's something else. But when you're going in, it is literally like a bathing in the forest or heathland or whatever area that you feel drawn to. No different to really those people who love to just float in the ocean or in a billabong or a creek or some waterway where you just feel everything, drift away, and you're feeling your soul self come into the lightness of what you are, because there's no one drawing from you. And often we can take without giving, but nature literally cycles everything, so therefore nothing is taken from any particular ecosystem without it giving something back. That's not always the case in our relationships with each other as human beings. nothing is black and white. There's many, many shades of whatever, but we've all felt it. There's no one that hasn't felt it in some way, you know.
So how does the language things work? As you're saying, because one thing that you also mentioned in the last podcast, which is a theme that has been revisited earlier as well. How does it work in terms of languages? When you say many languages, what do you
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. So, as in nature. So, nature has all different vibrations, just like we are nature also. So, that's all of us. Everything has sound, frequency, vibration. But within that, there's many, many oscillations of patterns, frequencies that are constantly undulating. They're constantly shifting, constantly creating something and cycling. There's just all this, and we're constantly shifting into different paradigms. Bees go into hibernation. Some bees do, some bees don't. Here in Australia, the peacock bee doesn't, but the blue-banded bee does. So you've got all that sort of thing. So cycles within cycles within cycles. We also have cycles within cycles as in our human form. We just aren't always aware of when we're going through our cycle of understanding, and then we don't always realize that sometimes I know some of you have felt this where you're not who you were a moment ago, and it's a really strong, oh, I've changed, but not everyone feels that, so it's very different for different people, and there's not one way to experience anything in life. They're just a multitude of experiences, but the language is always at the core of a frequency. That's it. So in India, and a lot of old languages that come from the old countries, is the language has a musical intonation. So in India, often people used to move their head when they talked. They spoke, I should say. And so, but that's because you're moving, your movement, it's like a song. As you're moving, your whole body's moving and mirroring the language and the music within the language itself. We disconnected from that in other parts of the world, and we became very stoic. We stopped moving our body. We become rigid in sometimes when we're speaking, unless we start being animated with our hands, and but we've forgotten just how intricate our languages are, and then we forget often that how we've heard something within a context changes how we relate to it. But in nature, the relationship understands itself, in not too dissimilar way, but yet in a very different way. It doesn't have the judgment. It doesn't have the judgment that people can be very harsh on themselves, and self-esteem comes into it. Nature doesn't really have a self-esteem issue like we can cultivate within ourselves. It doesn't have that because it's based on a judgment, yeah,
So
it's an interesting.
the trees doesn't judge themselves, I'm
No,
small and
no,
big.
not in the way not a human way that
Yes.
human,
Yes.
where,
Brilliant.
humans are beautiful, like truly, truly beautiful, and very highly intuitive and creative, but we can be so hard on ourselves and each
Yes.
other, like
Yeah.
way hard on each
Yeah.
other.
That has been my biggest problem on this existing on this plane, that
Yeah,
everybody is so. And so when we also talk about language and interconnection, is it true that these ecosystems, because I have read bits and pieces of this book called Biocivilizations, and it talks about how extensive network, for example, the amoeba has created, which is far more complex than the Wi-Fi systems that humans have created, for example. So it's just again decentering this idea of anthropocentrism, where the humans takes the center space, and we think, oh, the plant or the animal kingdoms don't have that capacity to create interconnected reality, and where it is saying, no, actually, those even the tiniest, what we perceive as the tiniest forms of animals have created those vast, extensive network way before humans have created. So it's
yeah.
very interesting. So I'm wondering, how does the communication that happens? Let's imagine a tree in Kerala with a tree in Australia. What is the network of communication? Do they communicate? And if so, what's the kind of communication?
Yeah, there's an awareness that all is in existence. That's the
Yeah.
first thing, an awareness that all exists. That's quite a big statement in itself for some of us. And then there's the awareness that the interrelationship has variances. And so it has different requirements to thrive. It has different requirements to break down. Like the fungi over there where you are would be a different species often to what we have in our microclimates here, because around the world there's different climates within each country, within each state. Here in Australia, within each system, there's different light requirements, there's different frequencies at play, there's different, but while I say different, in so many ways they're not. So nothing ever repeats itself exactly the same thing in anything. So we never create our cells exactly the same. Every cell is different, but it works cohesively together. It's the same with nature. It everything is different, but it works together cohesively, and so therefore it's never replicated exactly the same way. That's why we have our biodiversity, but it appreciates itself as being biodiverse and recognizes a requirement to remain biodiverse. Because if you have, say, we have a Pistantheria or Pistantheria ascania, and you might have a field of it, then it's going to draw up a particular type of nutrient or cluster of nutrients, and it will deplete that because the earth would not be able to create it in that cluster. And that's why biodiversity is so important. So when they do forestry and they clear the trees and then they go back and replant one species, then the trees won't grow up strong because there's not that mycorrhizal with the balance of nutrients in it to support it for long term. So the biodiversity is really the key. So what, say, for the mother tree that is here sharing us within its ecosystem, it honors, in a way, that's a word it comes up with, it honors all of existence. And it values all of what is in existence.
So it seems to me what you're saying is an inherent kind of knowing that exists.
Absolutely, yeah.
And your kind of like this podcast is also making me think about, I used to follow one of the scholars, and I've read this book long time ago where they talk about how important diversity is, but at this point, how in the past 200 or 300 years we have created this uniformity. Because the example that she was giving is, if your potato has a personality, then so it's like you like if you could walk into a grocery shop, all your potatoes should look the same, or all, because that's the kind of reality that we have created. Oh my God, I was going to ask you an important question following up from that. Now I
Yeah. Well, it's conditioning. What came up when you were saying that? It's conditioning. We're conditioned to see something in a certain way. So, there's a company here that set up a fruit place called Fuglies. So it was for the fruit and veg that had all different quirky shapes so they call them Fuglies. And because we're so used to buy a carrot, it's very for the not the traditional, because they're actually coloured, but so you get this very bright orange carrot, and you've got your apples, and they have to have a sheen on them, which is usually chemically induced, because they get sprayed. Not all, obviously, because they're either organic or biodynamic. But so you've got all these things or we dye our prawns. People who do they dye a colour because that looks really beautiful to the human eye, because we're conditioned to seeing things, because when we see that we think, oh, they're fresh. They may not be, but because they've been dyed, they look fresh. They look, So we've created this. We've created this. But you go into nature and it's very colourful. Even a forest where there's no flowers, through different times of the year, the colours of the greens. There's so much diversity in shades of green. And within that you've got infinite patterns within the foliage, and then the biodiversity in the shapes. Not only the patterns within the leaves, but there's different shapes. So you've got biodiversity in every single way. But, when you think about it, this is a global thing, but you go to school, definitely in Australia, and you all have to wear the same uniform, because that's supposed to level people out. So there's no disparaging between, some people can't have that, So on one mindset, that's how it's perceived. But then there's also that thing where you're showing up and looking the same, So it's also the way we're conditioning our children, We're, we're conditioning, we're cultivating a culture that thinks in a particular way. But where we originated from thinks in biodiversity. It just does. And, with all the different technology that's coming through, that our thinking process is changing because we get technology to think for us in a lot of the ways. Nature doesn't do that. It has its own knowingness, and we do too, but we give it over to something what we think can do more or better than what we can ourselves. So it's something that nature is not attuned to. It's not attuned to that. Humans feel that the way to evolve is through something like that, through our technology and through that, but there's no judgment there, but that's
It's
what's
always
happening.
the outer engineering of it, right? We always
Yeah.
depend on something external to
Yeah,
us.
yeah, it is, and it's like we were speaking to someone recently, and it's because a lot of people don't trust their intuitive self. There's a lot of noise in our being, in our bodies and our minds. There's a lot of noise, so sometimes it's hard to really trust your intuitive self because there's just been so much going on, and maybe a few things that have happened that's caused you to distrust a lot of things, and that there's a lot of wounded people in the world through many things, relationships, all sorts of things that have happened. So, but one of the things, that some of the people that have come to us and said, oh, so how do I go about it? What can I read? What can I listen to? And the first thing Shiva always says to myself as well as people is that take a breath, go within, and sit a while. You don't have to sit in lotus, you don't have to sit down, but sit a while, sit inside the self. Just breathe and feel the silence. But it's so uncomfortable for so many of us to feel and listen to the silence. It's like, oh my goodness, you get fidgety, you think I should be doing, but it takes seconds. It's not you don't just sit for hours. It takes seconds to just connect to the breath. And within that, there's just great clarity in just being. And then you've started on your journey to embrace and remember what it is and restore your intuitive self to being the front and center and epicenter of being aligned within who you are and what your journey is, rather than, oh, I need to write. It's not about not going and having a read of a book. I mean, that's always interesting, and you're getting someone else's experience and insight. But like one of the things that Ganesh has always taught me is that is all very wonderful and very exciting and so lovely of people to share that with you all. But it's also really, really, really primordial to first touch base with yourself. Feel where you are within yourself, where your trust issues are, where your self-love is. If it's not there, let's start cultivating now, because you're less likely to be swayed into something that is not fruitful for you. And then when you're feeling very strong and grounded within yourself and you feel like you can have that discernment and clarity, then by all means go and read 1 million books, but first get to know yourself, allow some space, ether, to just have a chat, inside with the source energy that you are, but allow yourself to, because time is everything in this world. Age, oh my goodness, people are so stuck on that. But you're timeless. And when you live in that, you're just really enjoying every moment that you're present. Doesn't often happen, right?
I think you just answered everything that I wanted to.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I guess I know for me as a human being, that's what nature gifts when I go in. I feel this incredible excitement, but also this like I breathe out, and that's nice.
So it's just the mixer, the Indian mixer going down.
It's
Like,
all right. We couldn't hear it, so it's
yeah,
okay. That's life, isn't it? There's always
that's
something
good.
going on.
So I think you kind of answered what I was going to ask. Like, all the reality you perceive when the mother tree came to you and spoke, and, what you're sharing. I wonder how someone who listening to this podcast can connect exactly the same
Oh,
way to
absolutely.
mother
It's
tree.
it's it's definitely not an exclusive thing to this body. I mean, truly, there's no exclusivity, and that's with Ganesh or any being that I work with and play with. Mostly, I play with them because it's fun. no one can have an ownership of another entity, and no one can own the source of anything. It's a human construct, that a whole ownership. I own that. It's the one gift that cultures of old, remind us of, that we're here to care for one another, and be present with one another, and be kind, remind ourselves to be kind. But we can't own each other, even in a relationship with a partner or anything. You don't own that person. And when we do feel like we own something or someone, we've sort of come away from who we are as beings, really. So definitely you can connect. And the mother tree, and I mean, it sounds like a patriarchal thing, but mother just has that, in this world now. It can change. It's just a way to express, like the womb, the cosmic womb, because it's where one feels nurtured and nourished. So the mother, is that embodied understanding. Obviously, not everyone has had an experience of that with the mother understanding, but if you do, then great. If not, replace the word. The tree is fine with that. But it is that nourishing, nurturing, and it's not to say we could have used father. We just didn't, because it didn't come up. But you can tune into anyone in anywhere in the world, to any natural part of the world, and it will absolutely share itself with you if you have the integrity, if you have the openness to just be a participant, whatever that means. I've seen some really cruel things done to nature, like really cruel things. And I guess it's just from not understanding. I've had people say to me, nature doesn't feel. Like nothing in nature. I've had saying the trees don't feel pain. And I guess it depends on what you understand as pain. Is a tree aware that something is penetrating it that is foreign? No, not in the way that a human would be. If someone put a barbed wire through your hand, you'd be saying, hello, what was that for? And excruciating pain. But a tree will understand of itself, and people like to go and carve initials in trees, right? I'm not sure why we need to do that, but I know some of you have done that, but I often go and see really old trees and someone's carved, letting you know that they've been there. And a tree will, I think it's just like anything. You ask permission. If someone just walked into your home without knocking on the door and say, can I come in? You feel it's like a bit of an affront, like it's just honoring, it's respecting and honoring each other as consciousness and as a living entity. And so everyone has the ability to connect and hear nature speak. And nature right now is so excited, and I use these words loosely, so please don't get hooked on the word, because you can get, your children get excited, they get all giggly, and but I'm going to say on that note, I've gone into a forest and I've been a little bit left of field in my own epicenter, and I'll have one of the blackbutts here in Australia, like it's eucalyptus and blackbutt. I love those trees, and it told a joke. It was really rude, but it made me laugh. So I think what you've got to understand is, if you're open to it, is that energy is always syncing with you, as in SYNC. So it's always syncing with you, and it's attuned to where you're coming from. It's attuned to where you're at. So wherever you are, whatever you're open to experiencing, then it will commune with you at that frequency. So the more open you are, the deeper you can dive with communicating. But if you feel this is all too woohoo, or to me it's biophysics, it's quantum physics, it's the quantum field opening up at its broadest sense, and it just keeps opening. But it's also neuroscience. So if you're more inclined to use those terminologies, this is exactly that. I just haven't used those words. But all of those fields of professional expertise, it incorporates all that. You don't always have to use a term to understand it. It's like some in this world, in botany, if you've got cool botany skills and you know all the botanical names, you rock the world. But as far as nature's concerned, it doesn't ask anyone to know a name that a human being has given it. You can embrace it no matter where you are. I worked with people and I had customers and clients that would be quite nervous about saying a botanical name, and they'd say, "Oh, I think I've said that wrong," and their hands would go to their heart. And I'm thinking, oh, I don't know how I say it. I'm sure I don't say it correctly, whatever the correct way is. I mean, it's supposed to be in Latin, and I don't really know the pronunciation of Latin, and it's not even the original form of Latin. So it doesn't ask anything of that of you, and it just go in with an open heart and an open mind helps. But it'll find a way to connect with wherever you're coming from. And then as you feel more at ease with yourself, so too will it find a way to connect with you, And that's all you really need to be aware of, if you need to be aware of that at all, because you feel this call within that, you don't always understand it. And, but, your energy is pulling you. It's like a magnetic field that just pulls you to it, and it'll show up in your life in the way that serves you.
It's like the judgment around accents or somebody not speaking Sanskrit purely. It's all human construct.
Yeah.
But I just want to ask a little bit more into when you talk about the awareness, the knowing, the synchronicity that does it mean that is it a subtle form of understanding? How do we know what we are feeling is right in when you are with the mother tree or any kind of...
Okay. So because sometimes there's this inner. I think it's like a self-esteem that we have. Like, I'm not good enough. I don't know enough. It's that I'm not enough in some way, and sometimes you can question yourself. Did I just hear that? Is that me making that up? And then what happens then? You'll have at least a few people around you that will say, "Oh, that's no, you just whatever, And so it's mirroring your own self-doubt. People will mirror that self-doubt, and then you just shut down. But if you give yourself that gift of hope and understanding that just take your time, just allow some space to come into your being and just feel it. It's not something you control. You don't need to control anything. I think that's one of the most beautiful gifts, because we're a very controlling society in so many ways. Or we feel out of control, and we feel, a bit scared when we're feeling out of control. But you can't control a sattvic moment. You don't have an ownership on it. Controlling is like trying to own something. So it's just being open, and then you just sit with it a while. If you're not sure, it's okay, because it'll find a way to hug you with it, or caress you in some way, or help feel you grounded and say it's okay. But also when you are opening up to this and you're around people who are very close to this, then just have some discernment in who you share it with until you're really feeling grounded in yourself. Because, in anything we do in life, if you're doing something that's a bit of a pioneering thing in your own adventure and you share it with someone who's just not there in that space with you, then often what can happen is they think they're helping you, but they'll shut you down. And then, you go into that reclusive moment. So with anything like this, I mean, I love plant communication, and it's definitely something that I thrive within. But I also work in a field that's very closed to that, and yet I work in a field of ecology and conservation and horticulture, but it doesn't necessarily use the language that the mother tree just shared. Definitely often doesn't. It doesn't mean that there aren't people. I mean, I've late spoken about Suzanne Simmons, who I love her work as a botanist, ecologist, coming from that field, because she's been able to scientifically demonstrate, to a degree of how plants are communicating, but also use language that often in science was frowned upon. So it's like a bridging, really. She's introducing words that Indigenous cultures have used always, but science has veered way, because that's too woohoo, not grounded, not scientific enough. So she's been a trailblazer, like a few others, like Monica, who wrote Thus Spoke the Plants, who are really opening up and forerunners in science and that way, to really just use a language that's more intuitive based rather than black and white. because science in itself is changing the way it tests things. And, in science, things have always been destroyed in order to study them. We've always, she always taught me, you don't need to destroy something in order to understand it. You get more from something that is a living entity in its state of the way it presents itself to you, and you learn more from that than destroying it so you can dissect it. And I guess we do that with our bodies when there's a diseasement of some kind. You want to get rid of it. You want to cut it out rather than understanding what the cause is and allowing your body to physically, mentally and spiritually and emotionally align with it and decide where it's going to go with it and how you're going to treat yourself. And I guess that's another thing, one of the things I love most about nature, it's the circular system that understands how, so if a tree is in decline because it's lived its fullness, then it is in a symbiotic relationship with a decomposing fungi to draw those nutrients back into the soil, like it's in that relationship. So while people say it's parasitic, because it's feeding off the tree, it's actually in communion with the tree in an allowance state of, in allowance. So it's drawing those nutrients because it needs to disperse it for the up and coming seedlings and the seed bank that's in there. So it is this network of constant communicating, and globally that is occurring. Yeah.
Okay, wait. I will have two more questions. I think I listened to Monica a long time ago on YouTube, and I thought I probably will need to go back to.
She's amazing.
Okay. Yeah. In ancient cultures, and it's even now too, that different trees have different roles. So, for example, like you think about a banyan tree, it has a particular spiritual significance. If you look at a tulsi plant, it has a particular spiritual significance. If you look at there's a plant for Shiva. I know the Malayalam word. I don't know the English word. You can probably pick up which plant I'm thinking it's common in India. So I wondered if those, just like different humans have different kind of energetic patterns, nothing inferior, but different cultures have assigned particular significance. People have meditated on a banyan tree, and then the thing about enlightenment. All of those stories around that, right? So, how do nature perceive the spiritual significance, energetic significance?
Yeah, so there's no separation. So the spiritual significance is the physical significance, and it's the energy. So it's actually not separate. We're spirited beings. It is funny because there's a thing about, oh, she's so spiritual. He's so spiritual, But spirituality is energy. It's light. And so if you're growing something, if you're growing a plant, it requires different light, different types of light, different. When I say different types of light, it's actually different frequencies of light. So spirituality, it's like nature's very spirited, and there's nature spirits definitely. Sometimes I go into a forest and they just pop out. Like I can just see the eyes forming in a tree. For some of you, that may be woohoo, but it's an actuality in the paradigm that I come from. However, it's undeniable that spirituality is pure energy, and therefore we are all that. Sometimes people feel uncomfortable with the word, that's all. But energy is spirit, and spirit is energy, is definitely with multiple infinite frequencies. So, it's that classic thing with human beings. We like to separate. We just, wherever our comfort zone is, we'll separate it and put ourselves in compartments until we feel comfortable enough to open that gate to share into another void or vortex or something.
I love that phrase. I just wrote it down, the actuality in the paradigm that you come from. Because oftentimes in separation, someone will say, oh, I prove it.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't exist in their paradigm.
Yeah.
But then
you
they
can never
reject
really
it.
prove anything to anyone.
Yes.
You can't.
Yeah.
And it's very exhausting when you try and prove something to someone. I mean, even science, as you know, as a professor, you have to publish papers, and what you knew 10 years ago would not be the same as who you are today, because in that time you've had opportunities to grow and understand, dive deeper. So it's a natural progression to, if someone's not ready to walk through that gateway, no problem. It's all good, and you don't have to. Some people never will. Other people go through many gateways. Other people will just live many lifetimes in one physical form. Other people will go through many lifetimes in different forms. So it's, wherever you feel at ease, wherever you feel your own calling is where it's at. But once you start to try and prove something to someone, you feel the depletion in your solar plexus straight away.
Yeah, yeah. I says there's a temple here that it's one of my absolutely favorite temple. I hope you can pick up the energy as we speak. I used to visit as a child, and 2 years ago I visited, and this temple doesn't have, like, I think it has roof, but it sits at the bank of a river. So when the water rises, the temple gets drowned, but it has forest attached to it and lots of monkeys all the time. But the temple is particularly dedicated to the forest Durga, so it's called
Ah,
the
yeah,
one.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And people go there and pray and all of that. And now that I'm thinking about it, like, obviously you worship the Mother Nature, Mother Goddess in many forms, but then there is this understanding that, like, as you were speaking, that there is beings coming out of the forest, but there is
Yeah.
this understanding that there are those goddesses, right? Like the
Yeah,
forest Durga. There's a Durga that's
there
specifically for
is.
forest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I wanted you to talk about it in different cultures, how that forms of divine feminine or divine, I mean, no offense to anyone, divine
Yeah,
masculine, whatever,
yeah.
or nothing, but it's that understanding that that's something beyond what you can perceive, but it has potentiality and a divinity to that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
could you
think it's
explain?
coming, yeah, it's coming back to we're all divine beings, and if you're uncomfortable yet again with the word divine, your being will give another word that you feel in resonance with. So, yet again, we ask not to get too caught up in the words if you feel stuck by them. Just let that go. So, in that particular forest, it is so rich and diverse with different frequencies of beings that are very playful. like you can't help but go to giggle with them, because they are literally the embodied energy of the inner child with most of us, who just love to go and play as nature spirits. I mean, let's face it, if those of us go to an office, you put on a tie, a suit and tie, or you get all suited up in your shoes and your stockings or your socks and whatever, and you suit up, you've got your briefcase or whatever, and you're restricted into that garment, and because that's how you're presenting to the world. You go into the forest that you're talking about, and you're a naked child. You're just pure nude, and you're just this giggly, nudie person that just is just playful and totally oblivious that you've got no clothes on. So your clothes in this context represents your facade. So in the forest you're talking about, there's no facade, there's no space for a facade. When you're connecting to the energy in that forest with all those particular divine beings, you're exposed, purely exposed, but protected, nurtured, and we see all of you and love you. We have so many facades just to get through our day. We've got so many hats we have to wear. And the multitasking in so much of our life. You go into places like that where the energy is free spirit, and you don't have to have any pretense. You don't have to show up in any particular dress code. You don't have to present in any other way but show up as who you are, because that's who is seen. You're seen for who you are. And some people are scared by that. They're like, oh, no, I don't want you to see me, because there's some element of, shame is one thing, or I'm not enough. It comes back to all of those things. But you go to those places, and there's around the world, but we'll use this one as an example, and they'll just feel, I see you, you're beautiful. It's that, and it's not the words that you're picking up on. It's just the playfulness, and you don't have to. You're not conscious of anything that you should be seen as, or demonstrating or showing that you can do something or achieve something. You're just there to be you in all your beauty.
It
And
is.
that's good. That's healthy.
It's definitely when you are there, there's a happiness.
Oh,
And yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so finally, I'm mindful of the time. Finally, I just would like to know, it's a human-centric question.
Yeah.
So everything is human-centric in what I'm asking. You know, people talk about going into the nature that helps with in the West, particularly there's this mental health. It's
Yeah.
like so
Yeah.
much money is being poured into that.
Yeah.
And going into the nature and all of that. Um, I wanted to know if you are in true resonance with nature, does manifestation, what the humans sometimes, think that what they want, does it happen easily in these spaces
Yeah. It's
compared
so
to,
it's
yeah.
you can never blanket anything like that. So people are at very different levels of stress, mental health, all different. Everything that's brought them to that state in the first place is so multiversal, and so it won't like it won't work for everyone. It can, but it won't because it depends on what one, let go of any expectation of so-called working for someone, and just allow yourself to unravel. That's scary for most people. Just whatever unravel is, you unravel. And as you unravel, you'll be at the right place at the right time, wherever that is. And then there'll come a place and space within yourself that you'll get this calling: go bathe in my rivers, immerse yourself in my stream, go swim in the ocean, go hug the tree that I am. But if you feel like, oh, I'm so stressed, I'm going to go into that thing, and you've got that attitude, it won't always be instantaneous. It might just tick you right off because it hasn't performed for you, because it depends on where you're coming from. But it is something that's always there and always open to embracing you when you're ready to be open to. But to think it's a solution to fix something, because in the universal sense, no one needs fixing. It's a very human construct. You've got the fixing personality archetype. You've got all the archetypes that come into playfulness, and so when you let go and allow yourself to just, wherever you're at within your mental state, just recognize it without judgment. Not always easy to do. Then that's the place you start. Let go of expectation, because you don't need fixing. You might ask to of yourself, okay, I'm not in my happiest self. I'm not sure how to shift it. Let's go on the journey. But I can say those words, and sometimes people are so hardwired that it's a process for each person, and then for some people there's no process at all. It's just an instantaneous thing. There's no one way, there's no better or less than. It's whatever you feel is working for you in any given microsecond, and as it works or it doesn't work, you shift accordingly. So it's more about tuning into where you're at yourself, and then allowing yourself to disperse into wherever it is that needs to be, in mindfulness, and then allow yourself to grow in whatever way works for you. But as for nature, it is always ready to embrace. It
I've
just
always
does.
found, yeah, and I agree that it is your readiness
Mm.
because I have always found, I mean, recently I found, you know, the manifestation that I wanted did happen as I was walking in the park. And I'm a verbal person. And I think when the language and the trees, when they combine, yeah, I feel like there's a resonance. I mean, although I love the ocean, I love the
Yeah,
water,
yeah,
I love the hills, but for
yeah.
me, it's that trees and the language kind of
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's knowing where you're at, and it's a very personal, very intimate. But just remember too, a lot of people aren't comfortable with true intimacy. People think if they have sex that's intimate. Well, it's definitely you're touching an intimate part of someone's body without a doubt. But intimacy in its primordial understanding is going very deep within oneself and really exploring in a non-judgmental way, and just allowing yourself to be. That's as intimate as it can ever get. That's super intimate. And then being at ease with that, it changes you instantly, and you start to know at a very core level how worthy you are, like really how worthy you are. And if we could imprint that on people, how worthy you really are of all things amazing. And that's really nature's gift. It knows that in humanity, it recognizes it, people just ask me then, or they just shared that then, well, how do you know? It's beyond word. It's a resonance that you feel that's so deep within you that it's we have a gift with humans as being able to feel. It is a gift. There used to be an era, and it probably still is, that that person's so emotional, maybe you should toughen up, But it's a gift to be able to feel. Like, it's a gift. How you use those feelings is what's
I
important.
all my life I've been so embarrassed about it, and I just wanted to get rid of. I just wanted to be like, I don't know, the British sense of dry humor, just not emotional. I've
Yeah,
been
but
told
it's a
I wear
gift.
emotions on my sleeves. I've been
Yeah.
told that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's a gift. I mean, some people have had to harden up just to be able to survive, but we're here to thrive, and it helps if we're kind to one another through our own processes, whatever they are. And not everyone has a process, so there's not one way, as always. But being kind is really the biggest gift we can give to ourselves, and therefore we're naturally kind to another just because we accept where someone else is at. And so, therefore, I mean, sometimes life is tricky. Sometimes, sometimes we get angry. Sometimes we feel very sad. Sometimes we get very down. But it's knowing how to move out of those states that makes the difference. If you get stuck in one of those states, that makes it really hard on oneself.
Yeah. Okay, so let's wrap it up. So I
Yeah.
think the lesson that I took from Mother Tree, the Mother Nature, is to be less judgmental, because I think as humans, this is what I'm thinking, that we're always thinking that they're lesser of a species, and what we can do is to exploit these other ecosystems. But what nature is really teaching us is just diversity, but also be less kind and non-judgmental if you
Non-judgmental,
do that.
definitely,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
because it doesn't judge. Like, it doesn't have that resonance of judgment. But it is aware when just remember, people are exploring around the world. People are going into forests and bushland around the world, and it leaves an energy within that area. Like, we leave our energy imprints, so it does understand in the. It's hard because people just automatically think from the mindset, but that's why going from your being, our words will disintegrate and you'll just get it from that. So nature is just connect with yourself, because when you connect with yourself, you connect with the core of life itself, and in that you connect with nature and all that is natural in our world, and that's everything
What would be your
and beyond.
final suggestions for someone who is beginning to explore? Not like Tara, who's in the Mohoka forest, like she's.
Maybe you can both side
Yeah,
Tira.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I know. I
Hi,
just thought
Jen.
about her.
Yeah.
I just wanted to,
Hi,
acknowledge that
Sasha.
because she just popped up. She
Hi,
just
Linda.
popped up back.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think have no expectation. You know, don't worry. If you go into a forest, like sometimes I would go into, like sometimes I'm working in there, and when I'm working, I'm in a different mode because I'm there for a client, and sometimes I'll feel like, oh, I can't hear the trees talk to me, and I'll go, oh, I can't hear them anymore. Like, it's like that's what a silly thought, but it's a silly thought. And I'm thinking that was a silly thought. But my modality isn't there. But I'll go on my own time in my own way, and it just is so alive with me. Or I'm not even, like, when we're recording this, we're doing this live podcast, and I'm not in the forest right now, but am I? So I'm in an office space, but am I? Because I've got the mother tree's energy all around me, and I can actually feel the energy all around me. So, and it's talking. So you might be in an office with computer screens, and all of a sudden you'll feel engulfed with the energy of the mother tree. So it's spatial, but not spatial in the way it limits. It's spatial in the way it connects. And that's the resonance it really wants to leave everyone with, but not leave you, because here we are. You're connected, very consciously.
I love what you said. Like, you don't need to be in that physical space to
No.
experience it, because you're truly interconnected.
Yeah.
If you're
Yeah.
ready.
Yeah.
Okay. I just don't know what
To
to
be
say, but
continued.
there's so much to
Our
talk.
hyphae is mycelium, and it's just spreading.
Thank you so much for this wisdom as always. It's such a pleasure sharing and learning from you. And I hope whoever from whatever time zone they are listening can really connect with what I just said, even if not always, but even in those moments, because those moments are beautiful too. So thank
Yeah,
you
all
for sharing the
moments.
gift of Mother Tree.
Yeah, thank you, Mother Tree. Thank you, the ecosystems around the world. I mean, I'm in gratitude always. I love doing these podcasts with yourself and all our collaborators and all of the people that do find us and feel in resonance to listen, because there's a lot going on in the world. So we're always eternally grateful. And personally, I get such a thrill in sharing. I love the creativity and I love the connection. So thank you, all of you. Thank you, Vishnu, for being inspiring, because without your questions, I would just be in my bubble having a good time with the tree. I wouldn't speak to anyone. So I love it. So thank you, all of you who are listening and connecting. We, love and light to all of you, because light is love and love is light. And we look forward to meeting and greeting you. And I know that tree and all the trees right now. I can feel all the different textures of the eucalypts and the barks around the world rubbing up against my leg right now. And a bit cheeky, really. But so just a happy journey to you all, and I look forward to meeting and greeting you in any microsecond in any existence. Namaste from all of us here in Talulah. Bye for now.